Greetings and salutations to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Kluger welcoming you back to another Grim Dawn build guide. It's been a little while, I know, but I'm glad to be back. Today I bring you the Totem/Pet Conjurer. As the name would suggest, a build focusing on pets and totem damage, in case you couldn't guess. This build spawned out of my veteran hardcore adventures with the Shaman Mastery. I'll leave the playlist in the link down below. So, as I mentioned, primarily we're focusing on having pets, as many as possible to do our bidding, do our damage, keep enemies busy. Further to that, of course, we are using totems to just dish even more crazy amounts of damage. And in addition, one of the totems does offer quite a bit of solid healing, which is really awesome. Through the totems, we are doing as much vitality damage as we possibly can, and to further facilitate that, we use a few skills to debuff our enemies and further increase the vitality damage awesomeness. So without further ado, let's jump on to the skill selection, attributes, and gear. So I suppose we'll start with the Shaman Mastery, seeing as it was the primary focus of this build in the first place. We'll go the typical top-down approach, starting with 6 out of 12 points in Wendigo Totem and its accompanying skill Blood Pact. The skill serves two purposes, I suppose. Primarily it does a decent amount of vitality damage, quite key to us of course. The root skill, I suppose, Wendigo Totem offers Mend Wounds, which give us a little bit of healing every now and again, which is quite nice. And this skill Blood Pact gives us... Why my mouse being all weird? There we go. Blood Pact gives us extra vitality damage, and we also get a chance of attack damage converted to health. Now, like I said, it does pretty solid damage, but in addition, I tend to cast it in amongst where my pets are, or should be. A, because it helps them with the fight, but B, this skill works on the pets, and so they get healed quite a lot. And in my experience, makes them nigh on pretty much unkillable, which is really awesome. Storm Totem, I've got a full 16 out of 16 points, offers us 401 to 1488 vitality damage, because I've got the modifier Corrupted Storm, which converts all lightning damage to vitality damage, which of course with this build is the focus, hence I've got that skill selected. I've got 8 out of 16 points into Devouring Swarm. Now that gives us vitality damage, not a huge amount granted, I'm not really in it for the damage personally. It does have attack damage converted to health again, which is nice. But the debuff is what's really awesome, minus a 42% vitality resistance, which of course is going to help our other skills, Wendigo Totem and Storm Totem, in terms of dealing solid amounts of damage. I've got 12 out of 16 points into Summon Briarthorn, kind of to operate as my main tank out of my pets. This is probably somewhere where you can add more or less, depending on your particular flavour of the build, if you want to rely more or less on the pets, basically. But that's a pretty good position for me. I've just got 1 point into Ground Slam. It's purely for the stun, which comes in handy from time to time, pardon me. I've got 6 out of 12 points in Emboldening Roar. Now, I know it might seem a bit funky on the face of it because it's a pet buff, and you know, do you want to rely on a pet to be casting a buff? But yes, he or she, I should say, casts it basically all the time, as you can see right there, and it works on us and our pets. I mean, and what can you say to 20% total damage? It's pretty solid skill to have there, considering it's almost a permanent buff with the rate of casting that the Briarthorn offers. I've got 6 out of 12 points in Primal Bond. Again, this may be a take it or leave it skill. I mainly am getting it just for the bonus, 26% damage and 14% health to pets. Again, pretty solid, seeing as I did want to incorporate the pets quite a lot in this build. And I've got 1 out of 12 points into Conjure Primal Spirit, just to sort of have she or he is handy to summon in a pinch if you're up against a couple of heroes or a boss, or even just a whole bunch of mobs. She does alright damage, she kind of flies around. I think she has a sort of blink strike kind of attack, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I find her nice to have around. Again, may not be compulsory for yourself, but I don't mind having her about. Across to the Occultist tree, it's pretty bare bones. We'll start with Curse of Frailty. We've just got the 1 point out of 10. mostly just to get to vulnerability, which I've currently got at 5 out of 10 points, again to achieve the vitality resistance reduction on our enemies. And that's where this whole build sort of really comes into its strength, because we've got minus 37% vitality resistance there and minus a 42 over here, and having those both running in conjunction is pretty freaking awesome. I've just got 1 point into Summon Familiar and 1 point into Mend Flesh, kind of just to have it there. It's kind of handy to have. Again, it could be a little bit of a lifesaver, and just general help. I've got 6 points in Summon Hellhound, just to have him about. Once again, he does pretty decent damage, a bit of an off tank. He's got a decent amount of health as well. And 1 point into Emberclaw, almost as a token, but again, not a bad amount of damage, hits multiple targets at once, and all in all isn't too bad to have around. But again, maybe you could take it or leave it. Moving across to our character panel, we'll talk first about attribute selection. I've more or less gone 1-to-1 between physique and spirit, probably tending towards physique slightly more. Physique, of course, just to help us survive and keep us alive, boost to defensive ability and so forth, is the good way to go. I've got almost an equal amount of points in spirit because it does work with our vitality damage and just, further boosts our primary damage source. And while we're here, we'll check out our gear selection for the build. I will mention right off the bat that I've become honoured with the Rovers, and I would recommend the same for yourself if you're following this build, because they do offer a lot of gear which synergizes with our damage types very nicely. Taking a look through the stuff I've got from them, the Rawari Lifecaller, as it's got vitality damage, offensive ability, as well as several buffs to our pets. I've got the Rawari Void Seal, which gives us, again, more vitality damage. This also gives us some offensive ability, which is pretty nifty. The Rawari Death Touch, again, giving us a heap of percentage vitality damage and boost to our pet's damage. Also gives us the granted skill sigil of consumption, which can come in handy from time to time. The Rawari Cuirass, which I may be replacing due to its lower armor value, but again, a couple of really solid buffs to our pet damage there. I think that's it from them. Yes, indeed. Other gear worth mention, of course, is the Black Grimoire of Ognapesh, giving us solid percentage vitality damage, skill cooldown reduction, which is quite nice to have in terms of spamming totems as much as possible, and as well, of course, the Summon Revenant of Ognapesh skill, which is the 4th pet of the cohort we have running here. An extra pet, he has a nice buff, which is pretty handy, and does pretty decent damage, so all in all, he's nice to have around. And yeah, that's the general focus as well. If you don't come across this gear, you want to primarily be boosting percentage vitality damage. To give you a rough idea, at level 50, mine is currently at 332%, which is not too bad, I think. So that's what you want to focus on primarily, and then as well, of course, your pet damage, your pet total health, just any buffs you can get for them is good. And then from there, you want to be, just want to be keeping yourself alive, pardon me, in the form of defensive ability. Offensive ability is always good to have, and just generally keeping your armor value as high as you can is always good. I guess 3rd tier priority with the stuff you come across. Boosting spirit, of course, is always nice. A little bit of a boost to physique, again, as a roundabout way of boosting your defensive ability, could come in handy. And that's really it. Generally speaking, if you're going to be boosting your vitality damage and your pet damage, you're going to be doing pretty well, and the rest should just flow naturally. Oh, and components. Hollowed Fang is your friend. 18% vitality damage extra from each of my handhelds, my weapon and my grimoire. Soul Shard's also nice as well, gives us another 8% vitality damage there. And I've currently got Unholy Inscription on my gloves for another 10% vitality damage. There may be better ones out there, but that's just a rough idea of some of the stuff you can be looking out for to have this build pretty damn effective. In terms of the playstyle of this build, I'd say it's relatively simple overall. Really all you need to do is head in towards a pack of enemies. I like to drop one of each totem as soon as possible, and at the same time be sending in the pets. I'll have them on aggressive, so normally they can be going in of their own volition and you can tag along, or of course you can be controlling them, but either way, whichever pack of enemies you're focusing on, chuck your totems in, and then from there it's just a case of throwing as many devouring swarms and curses of frailty as possible to keep your enemies well debuffed against all the vitality damage that we'll be doing. Through all that as well, Storm Totem does come off cooldown relatively quickly, so basically be dropping that as often as you can, and you'll be keeping your vitality damage up at a nice high level. And that's honestly all there is to it. It's a bit of a rinse and repeat process. Pets go in, totems go down, debuff your enemies, and just keep that cycle going, and you should be all good. I hope you enjoyed this build guide, ladies and gentlemen. If you did, please do remember to leave your thoughts, feedback, comments below. Feel free to like or subscribe as well if this is something you're into, and I'll be sure to bring you more in the future. But for now, I'm going to sign off. My name is Kluger, and I hope to see you again soon.